What if a single moment on live TV could flip everything you thought you knew upside down? That's exactly what happened one wild morning on The View. It was supposed to be just another day, same old debates, same predictable chatter. But then, chaos broke loose, and no one saw it coming. Whoopi Goldberg, the queen of the show, figured she'd steer the ship like always. She'd been doing it for years, keeping every discussion on track, molding it to fit the show's usual vibe. This time, though, she met her match in Caroline Levitt, a bold conservative voice who wasn't afraid to call out the media's double standards. What started as a typical segment turned into a jaw-dropping showdown that left the studio stunned and the internet buzzing. Want to know how it all went down? Leave a comment below, and let's dive into this crazy story together. The day kicked off like any other episode. The cameras were rolling, the audience was settled, and the topic was a hot one: misinformation in politics and how the media plays a role. Whoopi sat at the head of the table, ready to lead the charge. She introduced Caroline Levitt with a smirk, saying, "Today we've got Caroline Levitt, a spokesperson for conservative ideas. Oh, we've got a lot to unpack here." The crowd chuckled a bit, sensing the setup. Caroline, though, didn't flinch. She nodded politely, her face calm and steady. Whoopi jumped right in, throwing out a big question. "So, Caroline, how do you explain all the misinformation coming from conservative media?" "Let's hear it." It was a classic move, put the guest on the spot right away. But Caroline wasn't rattled. She leaned forward, hands resting on the table, and fired back with a cool, clear voice. "I think the real question is, who decides what's true or false? Because I've seen plenty of times when shows like this get it wrong too." The audience let out a quiet hum, a mix of surprise and curiosity. Even some of the co-hosts squirmed in their chairs, caught off guard. Whoopi's smile faded, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, come on," she snapped. "We check our facts here. We don't just throw out nonsense." Caroline tilted her head, a tiny spark in her eyes, and said, "Really? I could name a few times that didn't happen." Boom. The room felt different. Caroline wasn't just defending herself. She was taking charge. Whoopi didn't like it one bit. She leaned in closer, her tone getting sharp. "Please, Caroline, don't act like your side hasn't been caught pushing flat-out lies. We're here for facts, not wild theories." A few people in the crowd clapped, backing Whoopi up, but Caroline stayed cool as ice. She waited until Whoopi was done, then raised an eyebrow. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Whoopi wasn't about to let it go. She pushed harder, her voice rising. "And honestly, people like you are why this country's in a mess. You play the victim, whining about cancel culture, while shutting down anyone who disagrees." The crowd gasped, some shocked, some unsure. It was a personal shot, way beyond the usual back and forth. Caroline didn't blink. She stayed silent for a moment, letting Whoopi dig in deeper. "You act like conservatives are silenced," Whoopi went on, "but here you are on this stage. So, where's the censorship, Caroline?" The audience laughed, thinking Whoopi had her pinned. Then Caroline took a slow breath, looked right at her, and asked one simple question. "Are you done?" The whole studio went dead quiet. Whoopi blinked, thrown off balance. She wasn't ready for that. And just like that, the tide started to turn. Caroline didn't yell or rush in. She let the silence hang there, heavy and uncomfortable. Then, with a steady gaze, she locked eyes with Whoopi. "You say conservatives aren't silenced, that we've got platforms," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "So tell me, Whoopi, when's the last time a conservative sat here, on your show, not just today but this week or even this month?" The crowd stirred again, whispers rippling through. Whoopi waved it off, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, we've had conservatives here tons of times." Caroline nodded, like she was thinking it over, then hit back. "And how does that go? Do you let them talk, or do you cut them off, laugh at them, and call their ideas crazy while the audience cheers?" Whoopi tried to brush it off with a laugh, but it didn't land. The room wasn't with her anymore. Caroline kept her cool, her words slicing through. "You talk about tolerance, Whoopi, but that means letting other views breathe, not just the ones you like." And then came the line that flipped everything. Maybe that's why people are tuning out this show more and more. The audience gasped, the co-hosts froze, and Whoopi. She was about to lose it. The moment Caroline Levitt dropped that bombshell, maybe that's why people are tuning out this show more and more, the studio turned into a pressure cooker. The audience, usually quick to cheer Whoopi Goldberg, sat frozen, caught between shock and disbelief. Even the co-hosts looked uneasy, their eyes darting around like they didn't know where to land. Caroline had just done something unthinkable. She'd called out The View on its own turf, right to their faces. And Whoopi, she wasn't taking it well. Her forced laugh broke the silence, but it sounded hollow. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're sitting here right now, aren't you? So, obviously we give other voices a shot." The crowd murmured, unsure if they should clap or wait. But Caroline wasn't fazed. She tilted her head, her face unreadable, and came back with a line that hit like a freight train. "Giving a shot isn't the same as listening, Whoopi. You don't like it when conservatives talk back." The air in the room shifted hard. Whoopi rolled her eyes, but her hands fidgeted on the table, a sign she was rattled. Caroline pressed on, her voice steady as ever. "You say we're not shut down, that we've got a stage," she said. "But what happens when we use it? You yell over us, mock us, and slap labels like dangerous on anything that doesn't match your script." Whoopi tried to cut in, scoffing, "Oh, give me a break, no one's silencing you." But Caroline wasn't stopping. She leaned in just a bit, her words sharp and clear. "Really? So, where's the last conservative you let finish a full thought here without getting interrupted or laughed off? Go ahead, name one." The crowd went quiet again, the silence stretching out like a tightrope. Whoopi opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had no answer. The camera zoomed in, catching every twitch on her face as she scrambled for a comeback that never came. Caroline let that awkward pause sink in, then went for the knockout. "You preach tolerance and free speech every day," she said, adjusting her mic like she was settling in for the long haul. "But the second someone pushes back on your ideas, it's not a debate anymore, it's a fight. You attack, you ridicule, and when that doesn't work, you try to drown them out." Whoopi shifted in her seat, arms crossed tight. The co-hosts stared at their notes, avoiding eye contact. Caroline's voice stayed calm, but every word landed like a punch. "Maybe people are done with this show because they see through it," she finished. "It's not about truth. It's about putting on a show and calling it news." The audience erupted. Some clapped, others gasped, a few just sat there, stunned. Whoopi's jaw locked tight, her fingers tapping the table like she was counting down to something big. That's when it all unraveled. Whoopi let out a sharp breath, shaking her head like she could shake off the sting. "I'm done with this," she muttered, waving her hand like she was swatting a fly. Caroline didn't move, just watched her with that same cool stare. "You're done?" Caroline asked, her tone almost curious. Whoopi's eyes flashed. "Yeah, I'm done," she snapped. "I don't sit here to waste time on bad arguments." The crowd gasped again, louder this time. The co-hosts froze, their faces a mix of panic and confusion. Caroline tilted her head, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Or maybe you don't sit here for arguments you can't win." That was it. The match that lit the fire. Whoopi yanked off her mic, tossed it on the table with a clatter, and shoved her chair back. The producers flinched backstage. The camera wobbled like it didn't know what to do next. Whoopi stood up, her whole body stiff with frustration, and barked, "This show's about real talk, not nonsense like this." Then she turned and marched off the set, leaving everyone in stunned silence. The studio felt like it was holding its breath. Caroline sat there, hands folded, calm as ever, watching Whoopi's empty chair. The audience didn't know what to do. Some shifted in their seats, others whispered each other. A few clapped like they weren't sure who they were rooting for. The producers scrambled behind the scenes, voices buzzing through headsets, debating whether to cut to a break or let the moment play out. One of the co-hosts finally piped up, forcing a laugh. "Well, that was something, wasn't it?" she said, her voice shaky. The camera lingered on Caroline, who adjusted her mic again, glanced at Whoopi's spot, and let out a tiny smirk. That smirk said it all. She'd won without even breaking a sweat. And while the room tried to catch its balance, something bigger was already brewing outside the studio walls. Something that would take this wild moment and turn it into a firestorm nobody could ignore. As Whoopi Goldberg stormed off the set, leaving her mic in a heap and her chair pushed back, the chaos in the studio was just the beginning. Outside those walls, a tsunami was already building, a digital explosion that would turn this moment into pure gold for the internet. Before the show could even flick to a commercial break, people were grabbing their phones, hitting record, and blasting the clip online. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. It didn't matter where you looked, the raw footage of Whoopi's exit and Caroline Levitt's cool-headed takedown was everywhere. By the time the Views team could catch their breath, the unfiltered video had racked up millions of views. This wasn't just a blip on the radar. It was a full-on frenzy that sucked in everyone, even folks who'd never watched the show before. Social media lit up like a fireworks show. Hashtags popped off left and right. Hashtag Whoopi walks off. Hashtag Caroline owns the View. Hashtag View meltdown. People couldn't stop talking about it. Comments poured in, fast and furious. One viewer wrote, "Whoopi just proved Caroline right. She can't handle a real fight, so she bails. Weak move." Another said, "I've never seen the View like this." Caroline flipped the whole game. Even the show's loyal fans were shook. Someone who'd watched for years typed, "This was embarrassing." If Whoopi had a solid point, she'd have stayed. She ran instead. The clip kept spreading, replayed on loop, with every gasp, every smirk, every tense second breaking the internet apart. It wasn't just a TV moment anymore. It was a cultural earthquake. Caroline had walked into a trap, or so Whoopi thought. For years, The View had painted conservatives as the ones dodging tough talks, playing the victim card, scared of real questions. But now, the whole world watched that story crumble live on air. Whoopi wasn't forced out. She chose to leave. Caroline didn't budge, didn't yell, didn't fold. She just sat there, steady as a rock, while Whoopi bolted. And the internet ate it up. Conservative outlets pounced first. Fox News looped the clip all night, slapping on a headline, "Whoopi Goldberg flees The View after Caroline Levitt exposes her hypocrisy." The Daily Wire chimed in with, "Watch Whoopi crumble as Caroline brings facts, not feelings." Newsmax even dragged in a body language guy who said, "This wasn't just anger." Whoopi knew she was losing and needed an out. The clip played over and over, with talking heads picking apart every flinch and frown on Whoopi's face. But it wasn't just the conservative crowd jumping in. The mainstream tried to wrestle the story back. CNN brushed it off as a heated exchange blown out of proportion. MSNBC spun it like Whoopi took a brave stand against toxic misinformation. The Washington Post tossed out an opinion piece saying Caroline's words were just bait to get a rise out of Whoopi, not a real debate. Nice try, but nobody was buying it. The video didn't need a spin doctor. People could see it for themselves. Every time a newsroom tried to twist the tale, folks just rewatched the clip and called it like they saw it. Whoopi's dramatic exit wasn't a statement. It was a retreat. Caroline's calm, "I thought this was a debate" vibe? That was the real power move. And the internet wasn't about to let anyone forget what they'd witnessed. Then came the memes. Oh, the memes. Within hours, Whoopi's stunned face and mic toss were everywhere. One showed her walking off with the caption, "When you start a fight, but realize you've got nothing left." Another had Caroline smirking, labeled, "When you bring receipts and they can't handle it." A TikTok went viral with a kid acting out Whoopi's storm off, yanking out earbuds and stomping away. Even Hollywood got in on it. A former View co-host tweeted, "About time someone stood up to Whoopi. Caroline's got guts." Late-night hosts couldn't resist either. Jimmy Fallon played the clip and cracked, "I haven't seen an exit that fast since my dog heard the vacuum turn on." The moment was snowballing, bigger than anyone expected, and it wasn't slowing down. Caroline didn't need to say much. Her little smirk and that viral clip were doing all the talking. But she wasn't done yet, and neither was this wild ride. While the internet was still buzzing from Caroline Levitt's cool-headed win and Whoopi Goldberg's dramatic exit, the moment wasn't just living online. It was taking on a life of its own. By the end of that insane day, the clip had already smashed past 25 million views, and it wasn't slowing down. People couldn't stop watching, sharing, and laughing. This wasn't some random TV hiccup anymore. It was climbing the ranks to become one of the biggest talk show moments ever caught on camera. And Caroline? She didn't need to fan the flames. She let the video do the heavy lifting, but when she finally stepped back into the spotlight, she dropped a line so sharp it cut through the noise like a blade. Late-night shows, TikTok skits, and celebrity tweets were still pouring in when Caroline decided to toss her own spark into the fire. She didn't go on a big rant or call anyone out by name. Nope. She kept it simple, retweeting the viral clip with just 5 words. I thought this was a debate. That was it. No drama, no fuss, just a quiet jab that landed like a thunderclap. The internet lost its mind all over again. Millions of likes rolled in, thousands of shares stacked up, and news anchors were quoting her live on air. That tiny tweet packed more punch than anything The View could scramble to say back. It was chill, it was clever, and it let the moment speak for itself, making Whoopi's meltdown look even messier by comparison. Back at ABC, the folks running The View were in full panic mode. Word got out that the big bosses weren't happy. They'd expected Whoopi to hold the line, not ditch the stage, and hand Caroline the win on a silver platter. Sponsors started getting jittery too. Nobody wants their ad tied to a train wreck like that. The team rushed to slap a bandage on the mess, putting out a statement the next morning. Yesterday's show got intense, more than our usual back and forth. We love lively talks, but we're all about respect too. Can't wait for more big conversations ahead. It was a polished way of saying, oops, we're trying to move on. But the damage was already done, and the internet wasn't letting it slide that easy. People saw through the fluff. Whoopi didn't just walk off from a tough talk, she walked off from her own show. The meme machine kept churning too. One viral post showed Whoopi's face mid-exit with, "When you think you're the boss, but someone proves you wrong." Another had Caroline's smirk paired with, "When you stay calm and still win the war." TikTok creators reenacted the whole thing. Mics flying, chairs scraping, dramatic stomps off-screen. Jimmy Fallon leaned into it again on his show, saying, "Whoopi's exit was so fast, I blinked and thought it was a magic trick." The clip wasn't just a hit, it was a goldmine that kept giving. And while Caroline stayed quiet after her tweet, Whoopi couldn't dodge the spotlight forever. The next day, she had to face the music, or at least try to rewrite the tune. When The View came back on air, Whoopi sat at the table, looking a little less sure of herself. The audience clapped as she started, but it didn't have the usual fire. "I walked off yesterday because I don't waste time on nonsense," she said, her voice tight, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. "Some people show up here to stir the pot, not to talk for real." The crowd cheered, but it felt half-hearted, like they weren't all in. Whoopi was trying to flip the script, make it sound like she'd taken a stand, not run away. But the problem was, nobody could unsee what they'd seen. She didn't get pushed out or silenced, she chose to bail. And that truth stuck like gum on a shoe, no matter how she spun it. Caroline didn't need to say a word to that either. Her silence was louder than Whoopi's excuses, and the world was still watching every move. The fallout from Whoopi Goldberg's dramatic walk-off hit The View like a tidal wave. Nobody expected one messy moment to shake things up this bad, but it did. When she came back the next day, trying to smooth it over, her words landed with a thud. "I walked off because I don't mess with nonsense," she said, her tone clipped and defensive. The audience clapped, but it wasn't the roaring cheer she usually got. It felt forced, like they weren't sure what to think. Online, people didn't hold back. She didn't walk off to take a stand. She walked off because she was losing, one viewer posted. Another added, "Caroline stood her ground. Whoopi couldn't handle it." That viral clip kept spinning, racking up views by the millions, and every replay showed the same thing. This wasn't a win for Whoopi, it was a flop she couldn't dodge. Backstage, The View's team was freaking out. Producers huddled in tense meetings, trying to figure out how to stop the bleeding. Ratings took a hit, not a total collapse, but enough to make the higher-ups at ABC squirm. Rumors flew that the execs were furious. Whoopi was supposed to keep control, not hand Caroline Levitt a golden ticket to shine. Sponsors started muttering too, worried about tying their brands to a show that looked like it was unraveling. The next morning, the team threw out a polished statement. Yesterday got heated, more than our usual chats. We love a good debate, but respect's key. Can't wait for more talk soon. It was a slick attempt to brush it off, but the internet wasn't having it. People saw right through the sugarcoating. Whoopi didn't just leave a tough spot. She abandoned her own stage. The clip was everywhere now, burned into everyone's feeds, and Caroline hadn't even said a word yet. But that was about to change, and the story was far from over. Caroline Levitt didn't jump in right away after her big moment. She let the buzz build like a storm ready to break. Then, midweek, she sat down for an interview and turned the heat up higher. Looking totally relaxed, she said, "I didn't go on The View to start a fire. I just wanted an honest conversation." She paused, flashed a small smile, and then landed a knockout. "But if they run the second you push back, doesn't that say everything?" That line hit like lightning, spreading almost as fast as her viral tweet. "I thought this was a debate." Side by side, her steady cool and Whoopi Goldberg's flustered exit were impossible to unsee. Conservative outlets went wild. Fox News ran headlines like, "Did Caroline just sink The View?" While podcasts chuckled. Whoopi basically crowned the winner. Even people who didn't care about politics got sucked in, loving the drama of it all. Whoopi tried to shrug it off on later episodes, flashing her usual grin and cracking jokes like nothing happened. But something was different. Her confidence seemed shaky, like that day still haunted her. The audience cheered, sure, but it wasn't the same old fire. Online, folks kept the pressure on. "Don't bail again, Whoopi," one tweet teased whenever she spoke. That one bad moment had grown legs, sticking to her like a shadow. Caroline, meanwhile, had already moved on, her name now ringing louder than ever. The View limped forward, its ratings bruised but not broken. So here's the big question. If Whoopi's all about open talk and tough debates, why'd she bolt when it got real? That's the puzzle left hanging, and it's up to you now. Drop a comment below and tell us. Who do you think came out on top in this wild clash? Let's hear your take and keep this story rolling.